Okay, good morning, and thank you, Sabine, for inviting me, for having me here. I know Sabine for a very long time. I think it's 10 years now. And I know most of you since yesterday, or not at all, which I'm very sorry for, because I had great conversations last night, and I hope to have more of them today, and to exchange about what I show and what you showed. It's very nice projects. My presentation will be more about myself than the children or the people I work with, because as you will see, it's a struggling, also for myself, an artistical struggling. It's about spatial education. Talking about sound is always talking about space, and I had to come to learn this. So I might be the most uneducated person of all when I'm together with the students, and I think I learn most of all. So I want you to take part in this process of learning. This is what I do for a living, like soundscape projects, scenography projects, and yes, you can live by doing this. It took a long time, but it works finally. This is just to show you one of the projects we do with the Bureau Hands-on Sound, with the Office for Acoustic Scenography, which a friend of mine, Jan Poherza, and I founded about 6 years ago. He's a sound designer and composer, and I'm architect and sound designer, and so we figured, okay, let's do something with sound and space. What you hear is a fugue by Bach. I will not get much further into that. This is just one example. This is also what I do, is spatial acoustics and working out improved acoustic for spaces and venues. It can look like this, very technical. And this is a visual representation of spatial sound. And it's very difficult to get through what this actually means. And it's also a very difficult representation of what sound and space actually means. So how to get sound and space across. This is one project. It looks very nice, but you will never hear how it actually sounds. It looks very nice. But on a small scale, we, of course, tried to figure how this sounds like. When I was asked 4 years ago to work with children and sound and space, I found a kind of a machinery that was set up as an experimentarium. It was about, I don't know, already 20 or 30 years old, as you will see with the paint. This is to educate children within or for music and sound and space. And the task was actually that I go there and try to work with the kids, showing them, okay, a different length of material will derive different frequencies, which is not too bad, but also very difficult. This is the pipes, the length of the pipes will make different frequencies also. And the problem with these tools, as you see there, is that they will never tell about space. They will always incorporate space, but they will not tell and not show how space and sound actually work together. This should be like one exception, because you can step into this instrument and kind of feel the space of the instrument, the resonatory space. But this is it, and I was very unhappy with this. Having tools and instruments and teaching spatial sound on instruments or representations of instruments. So what I was doing, I tried to introduce problematic acoustics and test tones, and just to mess up the acoustics of spaces, and that worked quite well. And this is an example of acoustic teaching where there is no acoustic at all, but where you can see in this venue where I was commissioned to do this education, This is a picture on the wall, and I thought that this might be clearing up things about how sound is being transported through the world and where sound actually does come from. And you see all those planets and all the water and all the earth and extraplanetary and also mankind. And we were standing there and trying to imagine how this sounds like and how the space will transport sound and how sound will derive actually in this picture. This was the first step to go away from actual playing on instruments, but being more reflective and first intellectual about it. But being intellectual about spatial acoustics is also a mistake. I show you mistakes so you will learn from my mistakes. This is a project 2 years ago where I was commissioned to bring together like music and arts, and I thought, well, there also has to be some math, because when I was dealing with spatial acoustic myself, I learned that math is always very important, and math for sound is also very important. I was always bad in math, but when I learned more about sound, I became more and more fascinated about math and about numbers and relationships. So we just figured, okay, let's be graphic and let's be compositorial. And I will just show you some works that we derived or that I derived with the kids. I think it never does any matter what kind of children or youngsters or even adults you're talking to, because the projects will always stay the same, as you will see. First thing, I wanted to show what is harmony and what is maybe prime numbers and what does prime numbers have to do with harmony. So we marked on a scale all numbers that are primal figures that will not appear in harmonic education. I can get into this a little later, maybe in Q&A. And this turns out to be very graphical as well. Still has nothing to do with sound and space, but I did it anyway, or we did it anyway. We were talking about symmetry, and by talking and working with symmetry, it was also very important to also know about composition, and again to know about math, and also again to think about structure in space and in sound. Still no sound. Also a picture about composition, playing again with numbers and incorporating these tools like a scale. For me as an architect was very important to get the children I was working with into something that is not as etheric as sound, but it's very concrete and very graspable. Still talking about sound there. And then we did the modular, which was also bringing me into the direction, or brought us into the direction of harmonics, sound, numbers, relations, and everything. But no sound. The only sound we had in this project was playing on a piano on the white and the black keys and have different intervals on the piano. And then trying to figure, okay, what sounds harmonic and what doesn't sound harmonic, and then get this into numbers and connect these numbers with strings. Okay, this is like, these were two very problematic projects, and you might be realizing why they were so problematic, because we never actually worked with sound and space. It was my approach then already to work with numbers and to work with the fascination on mathematics and harmonics and everything, but it still, you know, didn't succeed the way I wanted it. So again, we figured we have to do some research on the qualities of sound. It was very quantitative. No, we were looking about the qualities of sound, and we did some drawings and some analysis on how a school sounds and how the ways through a school might sound and be aural characteristic. So the kids were starting to work with what they hear, of course. And they were having like those diaries. And we went through the city of Berlin, writing diaries and doing sound walks. And after those sound walks, again, looking for spaces that sound in a way interesting. And after that, reflecting with the children on what they just heard and the new tools they learned, you know, the same as I learned to work with the kids learned about or both processes to get together on this, to learn about sound. So this is one listening diary. And we started, maybe how should a classroom look and feel like to sound good and to be appropriate for like educational purposes and also to feel well. And we came to the point that we should be building a classroom that would be sounding good and would sound purposefully. And before we started to build classrooms, we started to work on time-based storytelling with sound and space and canvas. This is one project on our way to get physical and to get building with sound. And then suddenly there was this point where we bought material, where the kids took the tools and wood and screws and whatever, and we started to build classrooms, which they would like to be living and learning in. There was a lot of more reflection, of course, than I can tell you about right now, but as you can see, the visual qualities of these works have a lot of aural or acoustical quality as well, where there is material that is black and you cannot look through, but you can hear through, and there is semi-transparent material that you can kind of look through, but can very good hear through. And to play with these materials and to also build a chamber or a space and to program the space and to wonder how sound is traveling through space and through material, and to have the kids also reflect on that. So, and then there was the point where I still figured, where I still felt that they will not understand about sound and space. So how can I explain sound and space? And I tried, okay, let's number the space. How fast is sound? And only when you know or have a feeling for, I think, how fast sound is, you can actually work with sound, because then you know about the consequences, about the physical impact, about the awesomeness of this sensation of sound. So I said, okay, a bike has 20 kilometers per hour, and a car has 50, an ICE train has 250, and a plane has 850. But what about sound? How fast is sound? It's much faster. So how much is a wavelength? And you really have to... there is no sound, actually. Okay, you really have to show what... Or you really have to come to know together what is a wavelength in order to work with this apart or beyond musical education. So what are we talking about? This is a wavelength. It has 5.35 meters. So what? This is twice as short. This is again twice as short. So what I was doing is I was walking around with the kids and finding these scales in the space. You know, how much or how does a sound like if it has this kind of wavelength, and what is a wavelength actually? And I try to catch them, and you go even further, even higher, and then I thought, okay, it's time for some background education. 5 minutes. I have to skip because I have to get to the results. Just look at these pictures, and I was asking the kids, okay, how do you think these spaces sounds like? You know, this is history, and this is a process in history, and this is always has spatial implications and sound implications when you look at these pictures, these evolving structures and these evolving instruments. And I don't have enough time, which I'm very, very sorry, but I want to show you one project where in the Philharmonie of Berlin, I was working with young children and also adults on spatial acoustics, which was an experiment. Also like the ones I was trying to show when you get very physical and show, okay, this is a wavelength that has 50 centimeters, and what is the height of this, and how can I experience this physically? So we were talking about the Philharmonie, about the Weinberg principle, about the idea of this architecture, and so I just said, okay, let's go in there and beat the drums in order to figure out how far sound can travel and what happens when there is a drummer in one side of the room and you as a listener are on the other side of the room. What happens if you see the drummer hit the drum and look at this guy and hit your drum exactly at the same time you see the drummer hitting the drum? So what does happen is there is a big delay. And everybody is suddenly knowing how difficult it is to play an instrument in the Philharmonie, because it's the first time you realize about traveling sound and time delay and looking versus listening. Okay, I try to make it very short. We did this performance, we recorded it on several places with several microphones and played it back into the room, and you might imagine what the result is. It's a drumming, and everybody plays on the beat of the drummer, but doesn't, okay? And this is also due to the media and also due to the recording, but I hope you can imagine what happens in the space. Herr Waschulewski, bitteschön. The flashes are flashes, so that everybody knew the rhythm in the whole room. No matter how long the sound needs to travel. And what you hear there is one beat. This is one beat on the flash. And you hear the delay of the sound traveling on all those 8 microphones. You can see it on the LED. This is one beat traveling through space. And then a few minutes later, we listened to the results in one small space in a scale of 1 to 10. Like we had the whole Philharmonie and put it back together in 1 to 10. Put speakers where there were microphones before. And I hope you hear the result as well.
Zu hören, was dort oben stattfand. Sie merken, da steckt so ein bisschen IDs hier auch drin, es sind Lautsprecher dabei. Es steckt natürlich einfach die Aufnahme eines Raums.
Sorry. This is again one beat that you will hear, but of course the place where you're listening to it, it has all these delays and all these summary of space and traveling sound into 8 different microphones of one beat. I hope to get this across a little bit. I have another project which I would really like to show, but I'm running out of time. What I really wanted to show you is my small approach with a lot of like mistakes on the way of communicating sound and space without instruments and without numbers and without actually graphical or physical explanations, but just like a hands-on approach with microphones, speakers, space, and also a lot of risk, because I never knew how this would be like turning out, what happened there. And I think the result was that was very good, because everybody was walking through the speakers, and realizing the actual sound of the space versus the technical sound that has been recorded through all the microphones. And by doing this, we had a platform to talk about physical sound, spatial acoustics, and also the challenges like a musician of the Berliner Philharmoniker has when he's working on a piece of Mozart, for example. Thank you.